Hello and welcome. You're watching the Newshour Agenda. I'm Padmaja Joshi. The biggest story of the day is the violence in Nagaland that has left 15 people dead. There is a full-fledged political war happening on this terrible, terrible loss of lives. But first, it's important to understand what really happened. And it's important because right now, Nagaland, the Northeast and the country needs peace, not politics. So, let's tell you the entire sequence of events according to what we have learned so far. On the 4th of December, the army got inputs on the movement of insurgents in the Mon district of Nagaland. Based on this, they set up an ambush. They saw a vehicle with 8 people approaching them. Now, this was around 5:36 in the evening, where in the northeast, it is already quite dark. When signaled to stop, the vehicle tried to flee, and that's when the 21 para commando opened fire, killing 6 of the 8 people inside. The 2 injured were also taken to hospital by the army. Now let's take a look at the FIR that has been filed by the police. In the FIR, they don't just describe the incident but make very, very grave allegations. The FIR says that at the time of the encounter, at the time of the ambush, not only did the security forces not have a police guide with them, but they didn't even make any such request to the local police station. This is needed to be done. And the FIR says that this lack of action on part of the armed forces to take along a police guide makes it quote-unquote obvious that the intention of the security forces is to murder and injure civilians. But things didn't end there. As soon as locals got wind of what had happened, they gathered at the spot and surrounded the army team. Soon, 2 vehicles were burnt and a soldier was killed on the spot. The paras then opened fire to disperse the crowd, and in the ensuing firing, 7 more civilians were killed, several injured on both sides. As a result of this bloody feud, there is tension in the area, not just in Nagaland, but in the region, and the chief ministers of at least 2 states have asked that the AFSPA, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which gives immunity to security forces operating in the region, be removed altogether.
SPA तो ये जो हम लोग भी हमेशा गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया से पूछता है ये कि ये रिमूव करो, इसलिए हम हिंदुस्तान है biggest democratic country in the world, and this is a draconian law, so it should be removed from our country. There can be many laws which can handle, but this is blackened the image of our country. That is my feeling.
Barbaric killing of 17 innocent Indians. I offer their condolences to them. AFSPA is a symbol of oppression, is an object of hate. It should be repealed. And may I know, sir, and may I know from the government, will the government give permission to sanction those killers? They cannot be called men in uniform. They are killers of innocent people. Will you give them permission to be prosecuted? Will you repeal this AFSPA? No country in the world has such barbaric laws. Sir, आप 31 दिसंबर के बाद डिस्टर्ब एरियाज एक्ट मत इंक्रीज करें नागालैंड में। क्या इन्फॉर्मर का सर आखिरी क्या ये इन्फॉर्मर का ताल्लुक चीन से था क्या करें सरकार जिम्मेदारी?
Some people felt that AFSA, this Armed Forces Special Power Act, is the way to move forward. But then we have seen that stand of putting the Armed Forces Special Power Act has not really given any results. And in the last many years that the Armed Forces Special Power Act has been there, it has only been counterproductive. And there has been more unrest. And have had situations where a lot of precious lives have been lost, and people had to go through a lot of pain and suffering.
Of course, mistakes were made, and the Home Minister has also accepted that on the floor of the House, that what happened in Nagaland was a case of mistaken identity. But it's also important to see that after what happened on the 4th of December, security forces have exercised maximum restraint in the subsequent violence. For example, on the 5th, a group of almost 600 to 700 people that you see on your TV screens right now attacked the camp of the Assam Rifles in Mon. These are images of that time when a mob armed with machetes, other sharp weapons, even flammable liquid, they attacked the post and 3 buildings were set on fire. Despite complete chaos, initially the Assam Rifles only fired blanks It's only when the police found itself overpowered and outnumbered that they used live rounds, leading to the death of one more civilian. The Home Minister has assured that already there is an inquiry instituted and the report will be out in a month.
अम्बुश के दौरान एक वाहन अम्बुश के स्थान के समीप पहुंचा, उसे रुकने का इशारा और प्रयास किया गया। रुकने की बजाय वाहन द्वारा उस जगह से तेजी से निकलने का प्रयास किया गया, जिसके उपरांत इस आशंका पर कि वाहन में संदिग्ध विद्रोही जा रहे थे, वाहन पर गोली चलाई गई, जिससे वाहन में सवार 8 व्यक्तियों में से 6 व्यक्तियों की मृत्यु हुई। बाद में ये गलत पहचान का मामला पाया गया। यह समाचार प्राप्त होने के बाद स्थानिक ग्रामीणों ने सेना की टुकड़ी को घेर लिया, 2 वाहनों को जला दिया और उन पर हमला किया। इसके परिणाम स्वरूप सुरक्षा बल के एक जवान की मृत्यु हो गई तथा कई अन्य जवान घायल हो गए। अपनी सुरक्षा में तथा भीड़ को तितर-बितर करने के लिए सुरक्षा बलों को गोली चलानी पड़ी, जिससे 7 और नागरिकों की मृत्यु हो गई तथा कुछ अन्य घायल हो गए।
Distressing indeed, and the question that everyone is asking, will this inquiry bring the closure and justice that is needed and is being demanded? Is politics making matters worse, with political parties now sending delegations to the state? Finding commissions are being sent across by these parties. And is the removal of AFSPA being used as a political weapon, where the entire terrible episode of the 4th of December is only an excuse, or is the removal of AFSPA a decision whose time has come?
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Saju Verma, national spokesperson of the BJP, joins us along with Professor Omprakash Mishra, spokesperson of Trinamool Congress, Advocate Kapil Madan, national coordinator, legal cell of the Indian Youth Congress. My first question, though, is to an apolitical voice. We have Colonel DPK Pillai, defense expert, somebody who has served extensively in the Northeast and knows it like few others do. Colonel Pillai, when this inquiry has happened, do you really think, because a lot of people are very cynical about inquiries. They say one doesn't really know what goes on. Armed Forces Special Powers Act is there. You anyway have immunity. This is only a cover-up. Will it bring justice closure?
I don't agree with the allegation that the Armed Forces Special Act and the inquiry that is being ordered is a cover-up. Firstly, you must understand that the Armed Forces Special Powers Act is a very constitutional act. It was passed in September 1958. By the very parliament, and an area has to be declared disturbed by the central government and the state governments in consultation with the state government, of course, and that's how the armed forces are deployed here. So to say that the inquiry would not be this thing, you have examples in our country where officers have been court-martialed, have been cashiered for indiscipline and excessive use of force. And it's not something that is actually just restricted to our own country. Developed countries like the United Kingdom, which has this bloody Sunday on its hands, where in Londonderry about 15 civilians were killed on a peace march which was taking place, and it took them over 40 years to go and apologize to those people. If you remember, it was the John Major government that actually apologized for the killings that happened in it took place. Again, the special forces were involved here. So the Armed Forces Special Powers Act is an act that is required when you deploy the armed forces, and to say that it is the responsibility of the armed forces, I don't think the entire government, it's not just the government today or state government now there, but the entire system, our parliament, that has actually outsourced the security of this thing to the armed forces, while absolving the state governments of their responsibility to protect the law and order. The law and order is a state subject, and the state government should have the ability to uphold this. And Section 355 of the Indian Constitution makes it incumbent on the Indian government to use the armed forces of the Union where necessary, even on its own territory, to uphold the law of the land. So I do agree unlimited use of the Armed Forces Powers Act is, I think all political parties are guilty in allowing it to happen fester since 1958 till today.
Absolutely,
and,
but do you think this inquiry is going to get closure?
The law of the land by their own state forces. The very fact that the army has owned up its admissible, that just shows that we don't defend indefensible acts.
Absolutely.
The very fact that they've admitted to that there was a mistake that took place here, and the fact that they've ordered a high-level inquiry, a major general has there, and they're cooperating with the police forces, that indicates very clearly their intent to do a retrospection and carry out. And I'm sure that these things would, if you look at our track record in the armed forces, I do agree that there have been extrajudicial killings, there have been fake killings, there have been fake encounters, but it is marginally lower than what normally would expect in the neighborhood or even developed countries.
So give it a chance.
I don't see any reason why we should even doubt the professionalism.
So give it a chance, Professor Omprakash Mishra. Give peace a chance. It's condemnable. And you had the Home Minister of the country saying as much on the floor of the House. So what is a fact-finding mission or a delegation going to achieve?
See, this is the most horrendous incident. It is saving us all in the country. It is, of course, important that the union government, the state government, they have not only condemned it, everybody is sad about it. Government has also ordered probe and fine in the sense that, of course, we have to wait. At the same time, I would like to bring out the major contradiction involved here. Since you spoke about the AFSPA, the Home Minister's statement actually is at the root of or in the heart of the problem. What the people in the northeastern states, especially Manipur and Nagaland, as well as some other northeastern states, have been saying for years and years. I have always advocated moderation, calibration, and in fact, at one point of time, personally speaking, I was against AFSPA continuation.
Okay.
At the same time, we are ready to give every bit to the armed forces and their responsibility. But Amit Shah ji says the suspected militant and they were fired upon. In fact, you cannot fire upon just because you suspect someone to be a militant. And this is the problem that has been raised time and again. It is the BJP allies who are raising the question. Nagaland Chief has raised the question. Meghalaya Chief Minister has raised the question.
Absolutely.
Our delegation, see, we are not here to have any politics. Our delegation of the 4 members of parliament, they could not go. It is fine by us. But then we extend by the government, we extend by the people. But at the same time, we appeal that investigation should be thorough. And this type of an accident should not recur in future.
And also because, Sanju Verma, this just breaks the trust of people in the system.
Okay. Padmaja, first and foremost, my condolences to the 15 people who died in the firing, including 1 soldier and 14 civilians. I think, the Home Minister, Mr. Amit Shah, he was very categorical in saying that, yes, a mistake was committed and we are extremely apologetic about it. The SIT investigation into the matter will submit its probe report within a month's time. So, people who were responsible, they need to be held accountable. We simply cannot move on saying, chalta hai attitude is not done because this is a serious issue. I'm not going to go into history and say, because I think Mr. Pillai has laid out some very important facts by saying that law and order under the 7th schedule of the Constitution is a state subject. Police is a state subject under Article 355 of the Constitution. So states have been given ample powers federally by the Constitution, by the lawmakers to decide what to do and how to act. Especially in the northeastern states, remember, Padmaja, that while AFSPA came by an act of parliament only in way back September of 1958, it was temporarily removed for a couple of years. But when the northeastern states were reorganized in 1971, stringent provisions were added to AFSPA. Neither was the BJP in power in 1958, nor was it in power in 1971. When the AFSPA was made more stringent, 1958 Congress was in power, 1971 Congress was in power. Even Padmaja in 1983, when AFSPA was implemented for the first time in Punjab and Chandigarh for 14 years, before it was removed in 1997. The BJP was not in power either in those states, union territory or the center.
Okay.
So the point is, first and foremost, while there will be a pro, so that doodh ka doodh, pani ka pani hota hai, for anybody to come here and wax eloquent and give bhashan to the BJP on AFSPA is not done, because this has not been our
Kapil
doing.
Madan answered that, but to be fair, Sanju Verma, the ones giving the bhashan are your own allies. Conrad Sangma is your ally. Nefurio is your ally.
Yes, so let me come to that. I was about to finish, and I'll say this. Conrad Sangma has said that yes, we need to review AFSPA, but at the same time, has Amit Shah said no? Has the Modi government said no? We've said we will wait for the SIT probe. Remember,
okay.
I was on your channel also on the day, on the 13th of November, barely a few weeks back this year.
Yes.
A convoy of Assam rifles was attacked in Manipur by militants, and 5 of our men in uniform were butchered to death, including Colonel Viplav Tripathi, his wife, and their 8-year-old son. And at that time, I remember the opposition members on the panel said, law and order is a state subject. Why did the Manipur government not have more stringent provisions? So you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Okay, answer that, Kapil Madan. You can't run with the hare and hunt with the hounds. It is easy to sit here and say,
so Padmaja ji,
just a second, Professor Mishra, I'll come back to you, but let Kapil Madan have his opening comments.
Yeah, so Padmaja ji, the issue here is, if you see the track record of the government.
Remember what happened in Manipur on the 13th of November?
Yes. I heard it for the first time. I mean, the situation here is horrendous, where 14 civilians and 1 soldier has lost his life. Now, what we've seen here, though an inquiry has been formed, what we've seen earlier is that the government has been dragging its feet in issues like this. We've seen it in Lakhimpur, where the Supreme Court has to intervene and had to order a retired judge-monitored probe. Now, here you have a situation. I mean, so, Sanju ji, allow me to complete. I never interrupted. Please hold on. Please have decency. Please extend the same courtesy. I was not speaking when you were speaking. Please have. Padmaja ji, I think.
Okay, let him finish. But just a second. Kapil Madan, first of all, let's compare apples to apples. Please, let's not compare what has happened in Manipur or Nagaland to what has happened in Lakhimpur. There is no comparison whatsoever. Then people will talk about Punjab, Rajasthan, Maharashtra. We'll go down the rabbit hole. Please stick to the point. My point is, just a second. Stick to the point. Answer this. You are saying that we are going to send a delegation of Jitendra Singh, Ajay Kumar, Gaurav Gogoi and Anto Antony as a fact-finding commission. Are you saying that what the Home Minister of the country is saying on record inside the Parliament of India is not doesn't have any sanctity for you? You don't believe that. You don't believe that an officer serving in that region is going to carry out an inquiry within a month. You will have 4 of your leaders go and find the facts.
So, yes, Padmaja ji, allow me to respond. Holding the government accountable and ensuring that the government does its job is the duty of the opposition. I mean, if the opposition is going there and if the opposition is ensuring that at the end of the day, justice should be done. I mean, we have Sanju ji, मैंने आपको Sanju ji, I think आप debate में आप मेरे को अपना point खत्म करने दें.
Just a second, Kapil Madan, fact finding should be done. But fact finding should be done by qualified people, which is why you have an officer carrying out the inquiry.
So
you do not trust his credentials. He's incapable of doing an inquiry.
So Padmaja ji, we've seen the track record of the government. Had it not been the opposition in Lakhimpur Kheri, there would not have been.
Please do not compare Lakhimpur Kheri.
No, I am for a reason. I am. Please, madam, please. Sanju ji, I am responding.
So please stick to the topic.
I am on the topic.
Yes, please let him finish. Sanju Verma, let him finish, please. Let him finish.
So Padmaja ji, what do you think should be the role of the opposition? Should
the role of the opposition should be to flag up any lapses that happen. But even before you could have any mobilization of the opposition, sir, today the government says that this is the case of a genuine encounter. By all means, you stand in Parliament. In fact, today also in Rajasthan, Sabha, Lok Sabha, you did oppose, which is great. You should ask questions in Parliament, which you did. But what will a visit to Nagaland achieve other than make the situation even more tense than it already is? There have already been, sporadic cases of violence. You've had another case where on the 5th also, an army, there was an attempt to burn down an asylum rifles post. One person died over there. What will we achieve? Let's just try and make the situation calm.
Padmaja ji, just to ensure that the government does its job, and at the end of the day, the justice should be done on either side.
Sanju Verma,
I am conscious of the fact
they are holding you accountable, and it's their job to hold you accountable.
Padmaja, the government does not need to learn how to do its job from the Congress, which has been routed in 45 big and small elections in the last 7 years.
We've shown you in Lakhimpur. What have you done? You had illegally detained the leaders of the opposition. We've seen shamelessly Mr. Rajat Kumar Kenny continues to be the minister. We've seen what you've done.
Out of the northeast.
We've seen what you've done.
You lost Gujarat.
Okay, this is not about the political fortunes, but Colonel Pillai, one thing, what the facts are will come out in the inquiry, but there is a genuine concern among people. Now, this was the 21 para SF. These are some of the most elite soldiers of our country. How could something like this happen? 6 civilians were gunned down.
Padmaja, 13 civilians were gunned down.
No, sir. 6 civilians were gunned down by them in an encounter, and subsequently when they opened fire.
Yes.
In the encounter, 6 were killed.
Yes.
Yes, let him answer, please.
Correct.
Go on.
Yeah, it's a particularly unfortunate blot on the name of Special Forces, whom we all uphold in the greatest regards. This, firstly, murder of innocent civilians. It's against the grain of our army that we don't target people who are not at contest with us. We actually trained in the army to, one ek goli, ek dushman. We are trained to kill enemies, and the more number of enemies you kill, the victory is assured. Whereas when we are deployed in internal security duties, the fight is against your own people. The idea here is not to defeat them. The idea is to mainstream them. The idea of using the armed forces is to get them at an acceptable level of violence where the return to normalcy or return to civilian government is possible. And that's the reason why the armed forces are deployed in that. But the fact that they've completely outsourced this for such long years without any sunset clause, and the kind of pressure that is there in the army, I really, I feel bad that citizens of our country have died in this kind of a situation where our own soldiers have been responsible, and that to somebody as elite, because it's the best of the best to join the Special Forces, and they've always done us extremely proud in every war, in every situation, even in the recent
but do you think it was malicious?
They came back
because there seems to be a suggestion
you look up.
that this was a trigger-happy operation.
I have a feeling. No, it wasn't. Definitely, Special Forces men cannot be trigger-happy. We could be a regular, a regular company maybe. Normally, Indian Armed Forces are not trigger-happy, and we don't have too many incidents like My Lai or everything that blots it. There are people, there have been instances, but definitely it's not a trigger-happy, and you can't expect the Special Forces guys to be trigger-happy. I think that's but I think there is an element of this thing, as you know, that it belongs. Mon is an area of cognacs, and in the 13th November incident, there was a young rifleman who was a cognac who was killed, and his father said, he had a very rousing speech where he said, I gave my son to the idea of India, and I'm willing to give my second son also, who died in their ambush. And there have been instances in the past where they actually challenged the NSN-IM and the NSCN elements to tax and other things. There have been a lot of incidents that have, and there was a relative stability that had come into the region due to the peace talks that have been taking place. And you would recognize that, everyone, all of us Indians yearn for peace, and there's this yearning for peace is all the more in places like the Northeast, where people are tired by long protracted conflicts, and and they definitely like to be mainstreamed into what we are. And I think there's a yearning for peace which is organic. Now, we all, even in the armed forces, we are not there on a holiday. If the soldiers are there, they're not deployed. They're far away from their homes, and they are there performing a duty which is extremely difficult. It's easy to fight an enemy where you have the Geneva.
So you think this is malicious?
Prescribe your actions, but when you're fighting your own people, I think there was an element. I do feel, because given the fact that there was such a this thing, and there was this peace accord taking place, and who are the ones who are losing in the peace process? So probably this was either a story that was planted, which was deliberate, an informer who was a regular informer, either under fear or duress, or by attracting him, he may have fed along information, because you don't deploy the special forces in a normal operation.
Okay, so could there be an element there of people of the para forces being deliberately misled? That being said, I want you, Professor Mishra, to actually listen. We remember the 13th of November ambush in Manipur, where you had the CEO of the Assam Rifles along with his family being killed. Another man who was killed there was actually a soldier who was from the Konyak tribe, the very tribe from which these men in Nagaland have been killed. And you please listen to what his father said at his funeral.
India de taku thobale himu thobale moi juta manu pothaise Assam Rifle একটা মানুষ আজি মৰিছে একটা মানুহ আছে আৰু বি জীৱ লাগে আমাৰ বাচ্চা খান আমাৰ ঠিক এৰিয়া খান আমাৰ কন্যাক মানুহ খান আৰু বি জীৱ লাগে ইণ্ডিয়া কাৰণে খুন দিছে মই বাচ্চা খান বেছি খুশি পাইছে বেছি মন দৌৰ হৈছে মই
Here is a man who's lost his son in that ambush at the hands of insurgents, Professor Mishra, and he's saying, I will send my other Konyak son into the army to fight. What do we stand to gain by disturbing the fabric of the region which has people like this? We have those same Konyak people in our army.
I do not know why you thought that I should listen, or that I am advocating that there has to be some destabilization. My approach is very constructive in every debate that involves national security and stability of the country. And so therefore, my party, we are completely committed to uphold the dignity of our armed forces. At the same time, there is no reason but to seriously rethink, because two of the chief ministers belonging to the BJP alliance, they have also called for review.
And a very valid question. I really want to get an answer to that from Sanju Verma. Sanju Verma, why have a disturbed area? Sorry, please complete. Go on. Professor Mishra, yes.
No, I have been following Nagaland, Manipur, Meghalaya for many years. And to the very fact that you actually refer to a person from a particular tribe, that also is one of the reasons why there are so much of a problem, because there are Khaplang groups and yet other groups and so on. So therefore, whenever we are talking about Northeast, we should deal with it very sensibly and sensitively.
It should be handled sensitively.
Last point. The very fact that suspected militants can be killed, that is a problem. You cannot kill such just because on suspicion.
Okay, Sanju Verma.
Padmaja?
Yes, answer.
Padmaja, I think you made a very interesting point twice, and I'm not going to shove things under the carpet. You asked, is there some element of malice? I will just say this, I'm not somebody who believes in conspiracy theories, but be it the Manipur ambush, where we lost the 5 men in uniform from Assam Rifles, or be it the recent incident in Tripura, where no mosque was burnt at Pani Sagar, but on the basis of fake news, you had 800 people gathering at Amravati, Nanded and Malegaon, and there was, a bloodthirsty crowd indulging in arson and loot. And now, this incident, I would tend to believe that let there be an SIT probe, because there are some things in the equation which are not coming together. And while Professor Mishra has made many points, I just want to say one thing. It's very easy for everyone to come and lecture, but your ally Conrad Sangma said this. Supreme Court in July 2021.
All the time, ill-prepared for any criticism. There was no criticism.
Really don't want to go down that road about whataboutery, because for a change on this issue, or an issue as sensitive like this, we've seen a conciliatory tone coming even from the Trinamool Congress on the issue of AFSPA and whether it deserves a relook now, especially in areas where you do not have an active insurgency. Should we be curbing the democratic rights of people incessantly? That is something that really deserves wider debate. I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you very much, all gentlemen, especially Colonel Pillai and Sanju Verma, for joining me.